I'm going to hand straight over to our next presenters. We have Dr. Nattalia Godbold and Christopher Frost from the University of Queensland. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Nattalia. I am a white woman with short dark hair. Today I am wearing a dark top and tan pants. This is my colleague Chris. I'll let him describe himself shortly when he speaks. We are both from the University of Queensland. My role at UQ is as a project manager, primarily in the Institute for Teaching and Learning Innovation. I work on several projects across the university, and today we want to share our most recent project with you, one we've been working on for about 12 months now, titled Beyond Accommodation, Embedding Inclusive Assessment Strategies for Institutional Change. Our context, which you can see in the image here on the Brisbane River, is a large research-intensive university, which has its challenges when it comes to assessment implementation. We find that often conversations around assessment are quite rigid as far as curriculum design and surrounded in conversations about policy and academic integrity and security. And this project really came from a shared commitment by our project team to go further than just providing individual accommodations or adjustments for assessment pieces, and actually start to imagine what it would look like if inclusion became a part of our normal practice and was embedded from the outset when we're designing assessment at the beginning of a course. So to begin with, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal lands on which we meet today, as well as the Turrbal lands on which UQ is situated. And here we've got a picture from our homeland, the Brisbane River pattern from a guidance through time. So in 2024, our project team came together, made up of 5 people with a range of roles within the university, which include academic and professional staff. And we applied for a teaching innovation grant through UQ's Institute for Teaching and Learning Innovation. We received $25,000 to explore inclusive and equitable assessment practices across UQ. And in designing this project, our intention was really to foreground the student voice and the student experience, because we found that that was often something that is an afterthought when it comes to thinking about inclusive assessment practices and designing those curriculum opportunities. We really wanted to know from the students what it feels like to be a learner from their point of view and how educators are navigating this space from their perspective. So we started with a research question. First, for how do students understand those inclusive assessment practices at UQ, and how do educators provide inclusive assessment practices at UQ? So leaning on something that Sean mentioned yesterday was that we really wanted to move not just a practice-based project, but we wanted to move into research as well. So we actually did apply for institutional ethics approval for this project with the intention of possibly publishing our results at some stage. But we really tackled those 2 research questions with a multi-pronged approach. Our first was conducting student focus groups across the university. We really wanted to hear from students directly about what helps them feel included, how their assessment either supports or hinders their learning at the university. We conducted 4 focus group interviews at different times throughout the 2 semesters at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. We did 1 online and 3 in person, and students were given gift cards for those participation in those focus group interviews. From there, we thematically analysed those transcripts to come up with 4 key themes that students were telling us. And then we designed a survey for educators based on these themes. So we actually put these themes to the educators, we gave direct quotes from the students, and we distributed this survey with our higher education academy community and asked educators what they thought about these perspectives, how they were or were not implementing them across the university, and gathered that survey evidence back. We then reviewed UQ's Assessment Ideas Factory. Now that AIF, Assessment Ideas Factory, which Chris was part of establishing, is a database for educators to go and search different examples of assessment items across a range of different subjects and courses throughout the university. You can search this database for different assessment exemplars for content or whether they're work integrated learning. I went through that database looking for examples of inclusive practices in assessment, even though they weren't specifically kind of tagged and identified by those lecturers. I was looking for opportunities for co-design, multiple means of expression and engagement, was there choice or any kind of involvement with student partnership? And I found a range of exemplars from that database. We spoke to some of those academics who were involved with developing those assessment items and asked them in terms of UDL, had they thought about these principles, or was it just part of their best practice as a good educator, what they were doing? And we sought clarification to be able to update that database and actually start to make inclusive tags for people to look for these exemplars. And that kind of led us to the development of an inclusive assessment framework. And I know Kylie shared that out with everyone last night, and Chris is going to speak to that a little bit in more depth shortly. But really that framework then was what we thought bringing staff and student into a shared conversation about what assessment practices should look like at UQ, and grounded obviously in UDL 3.0, as well as the data that we were starting to collect in our institutional context.
Thank you, Nattalia. So hello, I'm Chris. I'm from University of Queensland as well. I was wondering how to describe myself, and I was a little self-conscious, so I thought I'd ask Claude AI. And according to Claude AI, it says, I can see a young man, not quite, with blonde hair and glasses, wearing a blue blazer over a dark patterned shirt. He has a friendly smile. Isn't that nice? So let's talk about the student focus groups. Yeah, so we aim to understand what helps them feel included, learn and show what they know. And we had some four strong themes from the student, from their voice. We had a theme of equity, access, and student agency. And an example is, if I have the option to do a presentation or an essay, I can pick what I'm best at, and I feel more confident showing what I know. Another theme was about student experience of assessment. It was amazing to be given the choice. That helped me engage more with what I was learning. Third theme was about assessment outcomes. And an example quote is, I get really anxious with exams. So having the options to submit a portfolio meant I could take my time. I was actually learning from it. And the last one was about relationships and communication. An example quote is, when my tutor asked us how we wanted to be assessed, I felt respected. It was the first time someone asked us. So Nattalia's already spoken a little bit about the journey of reviewing the Assessment Ideas Factory. We were thinking about having an inclusion tag to add to those, and that sort of led to the discussion about what are the different factors that lead to something to be inclusive, which is why we came up with this, one of the reasons that led to this framework. And we also decided to connect with Higher Education Academy Fellows, and we've put together a survey based on student feedback. The last time I checked, we had 20 responses, so, and that was early days, and that was during marking and course profile design. So I think that's going to go well. So the inclusive assessment framework we developed and we shared around, it's informed by the UDL 3.0 principles. It involves those student focus groups and also scholarly literature. And please check your inbox, have a look at that framework, and there's a link at the bottom with a form to give us some feedback about what we have there. I've got, if I have time, I'll just talk a little bit about, there's three main areas in that framework. There's inclusive, whether things are inclusive, whether they're authentic and valid. And an example of a description of inclusive is things that eliminate barriers with developmental learning, creative expression, and choice of variety of formats. Authentic really for us means, or what we found is it's whether it's personally meaningful to students' values or future careers. And valid is when there's clear links to learning outcomes, and also whether there's we have a sense that the student has done the work themselves and they've had that learning. So a term that we keep using at UQ at the moment is secure assessment. So it's about making sure that the student's done that work and done that learning, and that really feeds into the UDL concept of construct relevance. So making sure that the learning outcomes you're measuring are what the student needs to learn, and you're not asking students to do things that aren't relevant to learning outcomes. I would also like to acknowledge the great collaborators, Professor Gwendolyn Laurie, Associate Professor Deanne Ganaway, and Alyssa Malonis. What some other things we're thinking about is we're going to launch this framework at our UQ Teaching and Learning Week in 2025. We're considering a follow-on grant project. Something that isn't listed here is that I'm about to work with some student staff partnership, looking at the intersection of AI and students with a disability, and what are some barriers and enablers for students with a disability with those tools. Because there's some surprising research that there's actually a very low view with some students with a disability about these tools, and we're trying to unpack that and provide better advice. And it's time for questions.
It's also an opportunity if you would like to open that framework that we sent around. There is a link at the bottom for you to provide feedback and ask questions as well, which we would love to engage. So that might be an opportunity as well while we've got some time.
Thank you both very much. Yes, please. Thank you. And as far as questions, there's a couple coming through on the Slido. So please, if you do have questions, put them in there. Kylie's got the link in the Zoom chat. Otherwise, for everyone in the room, it's on your lanyard. But the first question that's come through, I was wondering how you juggle your approaches to assessments with AI. For example, replacing exams with other assessment types. How can you ensure that students are not cheating?
What a difficult question. So I mean, I think that, to my mind, we need, we're doing a lot more supervision of student work at UQ, and I think we're going to have a lot more exams. One thing that I'm trying to encourage with academic staff is to rethink what an exam means. You know, often they're timed, they're time limited. There's a lot of constraints involved in terms of funding and marking. But if there's something that the students would be expected to do in their future careers that is time limited, such as one example is a communications course. There's a client coming in an hour, and you need to apply some of the theory to this case. So that's something that can happen in the real world and is time limited. So rethinking what an exam means, and also that concept of construct relevance, where making sure that what you're measuring is actually what the learning outcomes are supposed to measure. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I have another question from Anonymous. I have assessments where students can choose how to present their learning. Some students find it unstructured despite guidelines on how to complete assessments. How much should be given to structure the assessment to ensure everyone is still able to be assessed against the learning outcomes?
That's a very broad question. I think exemplars are very helpful in that case, particularly if the exemplar isn't a high mark, if it's a lower mark, so they don't all follow the same, try and copy and paste and do the same thing. Yeah, please.
I just want to add to that because there's another question that's similar. So we have a lot of students who are paralysed by choice. And the question's just just moved on me, sorry. We have a lot of students who are paralysed by choice. Do you have a standard set of options to accommodate those students? That's sort of similar.
I don't have a standard set because even in my faculty, there's 40 different disciplines. So I don't think it's possible to do a standard set. But I think there was a session earlier today about consistency and the importance of consistency for students. I think what's really what I find really powerful is when teachers who teach into the same program or major or plan, however you want to call it, talk to each other about their assessment and try and get some consistency, coordinate amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think too, just building on that one, there was another project a few years ago that I worked on at UQ with Professor Kelly Matthews, which actually explores the conflict in providing choice with students. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It's unusual for students. Again, they've not had a lot of opportunity. We tracked students in this specific article, which was published in 2021, and I might be able to share how students felt at the beginning, which was a lot of conflict, and then how they felt at the end. Not every student changed, but a lot of them did. They started to really honour and feel that choice and question why they'd never been given this choice throughout their education. So there's a little bit of that too. Yes, it's uncomfortable because it's not the norm. Does that mean it shouldn't be the norm? Probably not. So there will always be bits and pieces like that. Sometimes we can alleviate that load for students by offering less choice.
I'd like one more bite at that cherry, if that's okay. So I think authenticity is a big part of that. So the type of formats that you make available, if you think about the authenticity, what could be personally relevant to students, not only in terms of professionally, but other values. I think that could be help you decide which formats to choose.
Thank you. And this next question sort of bounces off that as well. So with the different options, do you feel the framework is scalable? And how would you go about marking an assessment with multiple options?
I'll answer part of that and hopefully Chris can jump in too. I think our intention with the framework is not to judge assessment. The intention with the framework is to engage a broader audience across UQ to start to think about these principles as they're designing their assessment at the beginning of the course. Perhaps it's an opportunity for them to reflect on where they have given opportunities for inclusion. Doesn't mean that they need to be ticking all of those boxes. So a conversation starter for dialogue about pedagogies and assessment practices, I think, is where we want to start. Look, definitely offering choice can be difficult when it comes to rubrics, but again, we're giving multiple means of engagement and expression, but you can still represent knowledge, right? We can still mark that knowledge, and that's where it does really come into, I suppose, assessment design from the outset. What do you want to see, and how can these multiple means of engagement actually still demonstrate those core accessible criteria?
Can I say I'm loving these questions? This is great. I think the way I'd approach that to answer that question is, again, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but construct relevance. If you think about what your learning outcomes are, they are the things that you should be measuring. If there's if you have a criterion about how beautiful their PowerPoint slides are, and it's not a course about design, then maybe that criterion should be removed. Does that answer that?
Thank you. Yeah, these are tricky questions, and I like this one as well. Brace yourself. Does the inclusive assessment framework foreshadow or anticipate program or course level, so not at subject or unit level assessment?
Not directly. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do is simplify things and Yeah, I could see we could go for an nth dimensional framework that ends up doing things at different year levels. So no, but there would be scope for thinking about that, and that's some great feedback for us to take back to the group. Thank you.
Well answered. Next question on the list, embedding inclusive assessment for institutional change. How are stakeholders such as industry, or how is stakeholders such as industries engaged? Does that make sense? You can jump in. You just lean over for the mic.
I'll give that one a go. One of the things that we're encouraging in our faculty is for different disciplines to talk to the industry groups, particularly, and I'm sorry about the elephant in the room, but with generative AI, it's become very difficult. A few years ago, it was very clear what was academic misconduct and what wasn't. What should be what's good cognitive offloading and what's bad cognitive offloading. We're now in a very messy space where, depending on whether you're teaching creative writing or archaeology, the things you should and shouldn't be using AI for are very different. And I think the best path forward is to discuss that with industry. I don't know if that answers the question, but I gave it a go.
Thank you. Another question. Do you feel university policy at UQ supports this framework?
Is this being recorded?
Recorded.
We
We're
Yes.
idealists, right?
we're idealists.
Yeah.
Look, there's no policy that would block it. Probably the biggest barrier we have is just there's everything everywhere all at once, if I can put it that way. There's a lot of things happening. We were getting traction before Sam Altman came along with his toy, and we're finding it more difficult to get traction because people are a little bit distracted at the moment. But there's no institutional blockers. It's more external factors at the moment.
And we're kind of hoping that's why launching officially in Teaching and Learning Week, we'll be able to get those people who are like-minded, who are on board, start to actually implement these things and go from there.
Thank you. And apologies if I've butchered your questions. They keep moving on me, so it's quite difficult to read them out. And this last one I have on the Slido is a comment more than a question. So a next stage in providing support in this area and to accompany the inclusive assessment elements could be to share your insights on some of the most common questions like the ones being asked today. Tips for how to assess assessments that have format, delivery, choice. Do you have any response to that?
What a great idea. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I mean, certainly in my work, there's a lot of, we do a lot of trying to share good practice and provide templates and examples and workshops. And sorry, that was a very long way of saying yes. My apologies for wanting to fill the space.
And I think there'll always be nuance across subject areas, courses, assessment items. And that's why we're starting with a framework that just starts the dialogue and the conversation about what opportunities we can and we're comfortable in adding. And then perhaps we can continue to build more from the outset, and slowly we'll start to achieve that change. It's not about you have to implement all of these things. They might not be options in certain subjects and courses, but it's starting that slow process.
Thank you both very much. I'm looking forward to hearing the update next year to see how it's going. So could everyone please thank both Nattalia and Chris for me? Thank you.